There's a principle called divine hiddenness. It's an interesting thing to wrestle with. It sounds like it is what it sounds like. Divine, there's God, but hiddenness, where is God in all of this? In fact, it's the phrase divine hiddenness is often used as an argument against the existence of God. Atheists love the argument from divine hiddenness because the idea is, if there really were a God who was good and loving, wouldn't God want to make himself manifest to people, especially people that are open to that kind of manifestation? The concept is, if it's non-resistant non-belief. In other words, it's not somebody that's stiff-arming deity and doesn't want to find God, but no, someone that's humble and meek and open, submissive, searching for God, wrestling before him. But God still seems hidden even in those moments. Throughout history, this is often referred to as the dark night of the soul. And whether that precedes a belief in God or interrupts a belief in God, calls into question our belief in God, those are difficult times. And to think about, if I'm non-resistant to God, I'm open to him, then what is the source of this non-belief? And again, it's atheists that say, I can see why people would disbelieve God if they're choosing to. But those that want to believe in God and cannot find him, it must be that God isn't there. That's their conclusion. Theists, meanwhile, have offered multiple solutions to that quandary, answers to that question, one of which is, perhaps God is choosing temporarily to be hidden because he has a higher purpose in mind. That was certainly the case for the saints that were suffering their way out of Missouri, and Joseph Smith, who was suffering during month after month after month in Liberty Jail. The way this revelation / prayer / petition opens, notice verse 1, 2, and 3 of section 121. And picture a suffering servant kneeling in sorrow and solitude in a prison where you can't even stand up to full height. Weak rays of a winter sun poking through prison bars, and suffering for himself, the others that were with him, but also wondering what is happening to the saints. What's happening to Emma and the children as they are crossing the frozen Mississippi, as they're trying their best just to stay alive? And here's Joseph's heartfelt question. O God, where art thou? And where is the pavilion that covereth thy hiding place? How long shall thy hand be stayed, and thy eye, yea, thy pure eye, behold from the heavens the wrongs of thy people and of thy servants, and thine ear be penetrated with their cries? Yea, O Lord, how long shall they suffer these wrongs and unlawful oppressions, before thine heart shall be softened towards them, and thy bowels be moved with compassion towards them? Can you picture other people, other groups of people offering similar prayers? This is not shaking their fist heavenward, but this is looking up and wondering where God is in all of this. Think about the ancient Israelites, century after century of bondage in Egypt, until they probably stopped offering these prayers. Where is God? Nowhere to be found. And I don't know if we'll ever find him. Think about Limhi's people in the Book of Mormon under Lamanite bondage, generation after generation, wondering, where is God in all of this? To picture what the early saints are going through, what those families in Michigan are going through right now, what so many people around the world, in war-torn parts of the earth, in personal difficulty, where are you in all of this? In fact, one other thing to add to the mix this week, not just the passing of President Nelson and the tragedy in Michigan. Just yesterday in church in Elders Quorum, we got to hear from a beloved brother who is facing a very aggressive form of cancer. And in so much courage, he spoke to the rest of us about all he's been learning over the past year. And it was raw and it was real. And it was full of faith. And there were tears of sorrow and there were hopes for joy. And It was an incredible meeting. It was temple prison. It was Liberty Jail. And those kinds of questions of where is God in all of this? Did you notice, though, all the faith behind that wrestling? When Joseph says, "Oh God, where art thou?" he's acknowledging, I know you're up there somewhere. I believe in you. You may be hidden, but you are divine. So this is not divine hiddenness that is calling into question my faith, my testimony of God's existence. When he speaks of the pavilion that covereth God's hiding place, God still has a place. He just hasn't come forth from it yet. When it speaks of God's hand being stayed, his hand is there, stretched out still. When he speaks of his eye, yes, his pure eye, God, I know you're seeing this. Your ears, I know you're hearing this. I know you are perfectly aware of our circumstance. The only question is, how long? When will you come to our rescue? And that's often the question we ask. When you see what the Lord, or what Joseph says in verse 4 through 6, you see so much more of this faith coming in to dispel fear, to cast out doubt. He says, O Lord God Almighty, maker of heaven, earth, and seas, of all things that in them are, who controllest and subjectest the devil and the dark and benighted dominions of Sheol, stretch forth thy hand, the one I know is up there, waiting to come to our rescue. Let thine eye pierce, yes, the eye I know that is seeing us. Let thy pavilion be taken up. Let thy hiding place no longer be covered. Let thine ear be inclined, let thine heart be softened, and thy bowels moved with compassion towards us. He knows all of those things about God. Bowels filled with compassion, fellow feeling, suffering right alongside us. He says, let thine anger be kindled against our enemies, and in the fury of thine heart, with thy sword avenge us of our wrongs. Remember thy suffering saints, O our God, and thy servants will rejoice in thy name forever. My ancestors were Waldensians, which were a group of Protestants that huddled together in the Alpine valleys between Italy and France. Centuries before the Protestant Reformation, they were protesting abuses of the Mother Church and forming their own, but being persecuted as a result constantly. And during the days of the great poet John Milton, he wrote a poem called On the Late Massacre in the Piedmont. It's a brutal one because it describes horrific suffering. There's a phrase in it that speaks of rolling mothers with infants down the rocks. But it starts with this phrase, avenge, O Lord, thy slaughtered saints, whose bones lie scattered on the Alpine mountains cold. Even them who kept thy truth so pure of old, when all our fathers worshiped stocks and stones. To think about God coming to the rescue. Vengeance is his, not ours. But they're asking that God will give justice to those that deserve justice and give mercy to those that are pleading for mercy. Joseph is praying for that. The saints are praying for that. We are praying for that. And we need to. These are dark days, as it was for them. But to be reminded by this kind of prayer and petition that God will eventually reveal himself. He will not remain hidden forever. And to have that kind of faith, to have that kind of faith in his power, but also trust in his timing, knowing that at some point God will come through. Back to this concept of divine hiddenness, calling into question the existence of God. No, what it's calling into question is the existence of our faith. Why does God seems to walk a razor's edge, giving us just enough evidence to confirm our faith and just enough counter evidence to try our faith. As I've often said to people who are struggling in their faith, whether it's faith in God or faith in the church, your doubts do have a leg to stand on, but your faith has a leg to stand on too. And as we are caught between that evidence and counter evidence, between that doubt and that faith, between Lord, I believe, and help thou mine unbelief, oh, now this is a chance to exercise my own deepest moral agency, weighing the evidence and the counter evidence, deciding what I've experienced in the past, what I'm holding on to through the present, what I'm hoping and waiting for in the future. O God, where art thou? Closer than we think.